Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this, our third GrowthPlay webinar and the last of our three-part series. My name is Debra Baker, and I am Managing Director of GrowthPlay. And today's topic is fueling performance and potential, how to adapt and stay competitive in the innovation economy. I'm so privileged to be part of this conversation today. When I think about the work we do and the opportunity we have to work with lawyers around the country, I think this topic of growth effectiveness and innovation is one of our greatest opportunities, but it's also one of the greatest challenges facing our law firms. It seems that this concept of innovation is something that is a universal sticking point for so many law organizations. So our hope today in sharing our point of view on innovation and what we can do to help our attorneys adapt and change to an increasingly competitive marketplace is to share a point of view first and foremost on innovation as part of an integrated growth strategies. And in doing so, to talk about not just what we should do and what innovation looks like, but to really focus in the how part of innovation. How do we actually engage and energize our teams to be effective when it comes to driving change inside our organizations? I'll share a few practical tips with the goal of setting some context first and providing you some best practices, and then hopefully have you leave today with some practical steps that you can take with you going forward. As part of that, I'm also pleased to be able to share with you some of the preliminary findings of our GrowthPlay Law Innovation Study. This has been a really exciting initiative that we've done in partnership with more than 50 innovative lawyers around the country. And I know many of you are signed up and on the webinar today. So for those of you who have been participants in our study, we're going to give you a little taste of some of our preliminary findings, and then we'll be releasing our preliminary report in the next few weeks. And then finally today, as we look at what can we offer you to be supportive in the work that you're doing inside your organizations, we're going to leave you with 5 questions. And we think these questions are useful to help you have those more challenging conversations and to kickstart conversations around growth. And this is such a great time of year to have these conversations with budget season coming upon us for so many people. If we can help you create conditions about where and how to make investments for 2019, that can be a great start for really creating that energy and excitement you want inside your firm. So as I was preparing for this presentation today, I do what many consultants do, which is troll the internet and look for some inspiration. And I came across the website of Bob and Trish Evans. And Bob and Trish are professional skugglers. And if you don't know what scuggling is, the image on the screen right now is pretty self-explanatory. Scuggling is a combination of juggling and water skiing. And when I saw the videos of what they were doing, I saw a number of ties to this conversation of innovation. First, when you're thinking about what innovation in action looks like, I don't think you have to look any further than this image of scuggling. It really is an inspiring and an innovative thing that they are doing. Equally important, though, the things that really stood out to me was, one, the amount of technical expertise that it takes to be a successful scuggler, right? You have to be a fantastic juggler, you have to be a highly skilled water skier, and you have to have acrobatic skills in order to be successful. So those technical skill sets are incredibly important. The second thing is that to be innovative in this way, you can't do it alone, right? That there is no, even if there was only one person on these skis, it would take a team in order to make scuggling possible. Someone has to drive the boat, someone has to be on the lookout, someone has to actually be doing that work. And the third thing that really struck out to me when I looked at this image was this idea that even with the best team, and even with the most talented people, we can't possibly be successful at scuggling unless we're constantly anticipating and being prepared to adapt and being flexible to changing conditions. Some of those things, because we're experts, we're highly attuned to what those potential challenges are going to be, but other things are just unforeseen and we can't possibly anticipate them. There's environmental factors. There's changes in the water conditions and the wind conditions and the air temperatures that could impact your ability to be successful. There's third-party barriers. There's other people who are playing in this water right now that could have an impact on what you're doing, whether they're boaters or surfers or swimmers or someone else that gets in, that could have an impact or get in your way while you are trying to be the most successful scuggler you can possibly be. And then there's also just human nature, right? As humans, we're apt to not be perfect all of the time, and we have to have that ability and the flexibility to adapt to what we're doing in order to be successful. And so as I think about where we are in the legal profession right now, I think in many ways there's so many ties to this concept of scuggling. And for so long, we as lawyers and the lawyers that we were working with have been so focused on how do I be the best technical expert that we're losing sight of other things that we should be doing. So to set up this conversation about innovation, I wanted to talk about 3 of those balls that are in the air that we have to constantly be adapting to. And the first is this idea of innovation economics. Now, we all know innovation can be a relatively loaded term inside the organizations that we're working with. But the one variable that doesn't change when it comes to this topic of innovation is the fact that today we are now living in an innovation economy. So no matter what we call or how we think about innovation, we've got to be responsive to the market conditions that are impacting the way that we run our legal businesses. And all of this is ultimately being driven by technology. The first factor of innovation economics that we need to think about is the increasingly interdependence that we have on the communities in which we work with. Globalization, everything we do impacts another community or another organization or another business unit. Something happens across the world, it affects us. The world today is just increasingly interdependent. The second thing is we're all very interconnected. Technology both connects us and it impacts the way that we're communicating. So when we're thinking about how are we going to be successful at our business, it's not should we or shouldn't we be leveraging technology in order to make the practice of law better. It's a requirement. It is the way we do business today. And so we have to accommodate that as part of the work that we're doing. And the third factor is this information overload. Technology has gifted us this power to access so much information, and yet where our power base was, what we used to be so valuable, our lawyers used to be so valuable in educating people and providing them information. Today, the most valuable lawyers aren't those that can give, can write a treatise on one area of the law. The most valuable lawyers are those that can read the treatise and tell their clients, here are the 3 things that matter most to you. So the innovation economy changes the way we add value as a legal community. So one factor, we've got to be responsive to this. And so as we're thinking about how do we help our lawyers be more successful and be more innovative, our ability to help them recognize these realities and be more responsive to them is going to be a great opportunity for us. The second factor is the fact that our profession is being disrupted. Again, whether we like it or not, I always put that 2007 as a line in the sand, and you think about all the things that have changed over the last this past decade versus the 70 years previous to that. In our old world, there used to be big law and small law, or big law, small law, and medium law. And you could make choices rather simply on who and how to engage with people. Today's world's completely different. There's old law, which is a combination of big law, small law, and medium law. There's also new law business models. There's non-law business models. There's legal technology providers and consultants. and staffing agencies. There's also do-it-yourself law. Because there's so much information available, people are avoiding, trying to find ways to solve their own problems because of the costs and of legal services. And this is an important thing to help our attorneys recognize, because the status quo isn't going to work, and we can't be afraid of these other types of legal models. We can't be afraid of them as potentially cannibalizing our business or taking business away from them. We must work to help our clients leverage and work more collaboratively, because we're all, again, interdependent and interconnected with one another. And then the third factor that we want to think about in terms of how can we help, what is the context around which we have to start thinking about driving innovation, is this idea of lawyer is doer seller. Lawyers have a lot of responsibility on their plates, and they're all wearing multiple hats in terms of both being the service that they provide and also being the revenue generator and bringing in new clients. And with this, as we think about the lawyer as doer seller and what that means to us, first and foremost, we've got to help educate our lawyers that quality and technical expertise are table stakes for doing business, right? In the scuggling world, if you want to scuggle, you have to have that quality and technical expertise just to play the game, but it's not going to be enough. So we have to help them think more broadly about how we're going to deliver those services and how we're going to connect and create value for our clients. We also want to recognize that there's still this perception out there of lawyers as being the place of no and slow. We've got to change that perception that lawyers are going to slow down and keep things from happening, and rather help find ways to be the place of where we get to yes and we find opportunities, and that our job is not to just mitigate risk, but rather to help our clients take advantage of opportunities, build new markets, and be more competitive in the jobs that they do. And then the third thing, we've got to really help our lawyers understand as individuals that rational, the head logic that we all use, both when we're adding values to clients and we're developing client relationships, that's only part of the game. What we've really got to do is help our lawyers connect and use both their head and their heart to connect with clients and make our clients feel that we're really here to add value to them. And so as we think about how do we really optimize your growth engines inside your law firms to be effective, we need to make sure that our operational efficiencies and the business side of what we do, and that we dot the I's and cross the T's. And we know there's a long way that most law firms have to do to really perfect that model. But we've also got to create conditions where we can hold space open to help our lawyers think about how are we responding to these moving parts that are going on in the world of our clients, and how can we adapt and change to be more responsive to those things. And that's really the underlying principles of the reason that innovation is so important. And so for those of you who have been part of our last, the two previous webinars, or for those of you who are just learning, joining us for the first time, the way we've really built out this series is to think about growth effectiveness as a universal, as a multi-pronged effort inside the organization. And at our first webinar, we talked about engaging individuals and the multiple, and introduced you to the different roles that lawyers can play as they master sales fundamentals and build the client experience, that there's not one size fits all path to participation. And so the more that we can engage individuals around their personal strengths, the more we're going to elevate the growth of an organization. And that's a really great place to start, because it's, when we add not only great technical and legal expertise to our skill set, but also relationship building skills, we're gonna move the needle very quickly when it comes to driving growth and creating more predictable and sustainable revenue. The second thing, and that was what we talked about last month on the webinar, was once we have really, really strong performing individuals, how can we put those individuals together in a team and help them collaborate and leverage the power of we to sell me and be more effective in the way that they're working together to create value for clients. And I think many of us have seen the studies around collaboration, that it's not just what clients want in a better way of doing business, but there's also a direct link to profitability. So we talked about what are those things that go into being a really collaborative organization. And then the third bucket, which is where we're focusing today, is when it comes to optimizing our organizations. One, how do we get really clear about what our plan is, and how do we start performing to a growth plan that's going to help us achieve those goals? And then the innovation bucket, right? How do we hold space, and how do we make innovation not just a bright, shiny object, but a way of our business model and a way of doing business that we're constantly thinking about? And so when we think, again, the broader context of how does this all fit into what you're doing in your organizations today, I think a key message for you to take away from this conversation is that innovation is not an option. We have to find ways to include it in what we're doing. And the good news is that I should say the bad news is we need to do all 6 of these things, but the good news is that there's practical strategies that we can all start putting in place to be more effective in this area. So what are some of those practical strategies? As we think about, the folks that we're working with around the country, and we're looking at what works when it comes to driving change and innovation, we've identified these 5 best practices as hallmarks of the firms that are doing right. And we're going to walk you through those today. But as we do, I think one of the things I want you to think about as you look at this list, you're seeing very little or actually nothing on here that is talking about technical expertise, what the process is, whether it's design thinking or Lean Six Sigma or something else or some other process and methodology. These best practices are all about how do we bring people together and enable them to leverage those systems and processes, and how do we bring together the right mix of talent that's going to allow those people to work to their highest and best use. And so that's where from our perspective, you're going to see the difference between success and failure. It's the firms that get really serious on how do we do these 5 things well. The first of those things is what I personally think of as be before do. And it is among the most simple concepts that we have when it comes to driving innovation. And it's also the one that we seem to skip over the most. But the be, do, have construct is really about getting clear from the onset about what is your vision for success. Who do you want to be? And we have to answer that question first before we can figure out what we need to do to get those things. And an easy way to think about this is the weight loss metaphor, right? Most of us at some point or another have gone on a diet in our lives. Many times the reason we go on a diet is because we have a very specific goal in mind. I have this event in next month, and I want to wear this dress that does not fit me now. What do I need to do to get into that dress? And we know how to diet, right? There's specific things we know how to do. We know we have to eat less. We know we have to exercise more. And if we're disciplined and we're really committed to it, and for those of us who work in the legal profession generally, we're pretty disciplined people. So chances are we're going to do what we need to do to get that result. The problem is that it's very short-sighted, and it's really focusing on what's that thing right in front of us. And what happens is when we just do something to get a short-term result, we revert to bad behaviors after that's over. So many times after you lose those 5 or 10 pounds, you have your big event, you're so proud of yourself, but then you go back to the way you were in the past and you wait until the next event. So what happens? We gain that weight back. Sometimes we gain more, and then there's another event. So then we go into we go into crisis mode. What do we need to do to get? I eat less, I exercise more. And it's this hamster wheel that we get on. The people who are most successful at weight loss have made the decision to say, I want to be a healthy person and I want to live a healthy lifestyle. By doing these things, it's going to allow me to be active and do all the outdoor activities that I love to do, or to be active and play with my kids and not feel like I have to sit on the sideline. Whatever that motivation is doesn't matter, but they've made a conscious choice that I want to be healthy. And once you've made that choice and you commit to it and you know that that's what your end game is, it gets a lot easier to say, what do I need to do to be that person and achieve those goals? But when we skip that part, we miss out on the opportunity, and it sets us up right from the start for losing steam and burning out and running out of energy. So as you're thinking about where innovation fits inside your organization, this central question of who do you want to be is the place we have to start, because until organizations make a conscious choice, we need that so that they can set up for success. The answer doesn't matter. There's some things on this slide, like maybe we want to say, hey, we want to change our perception we want to change the perception of our organization as the firm that keeps stuff from getting done. And we want to become business advisors to our clients, where we're actually a combination of legal advisor and consultant, and we're going to add value, and we're going to help. Everything we're going to do is going to be tied to the business success of another organization. That's a great B. It doesn't really matter as long as everyone in your organization gets clear about it and makes sure that you communicate it and it's not a secret. That's going to allow you to set the priorities and make the decisions that you need to do. The second best practice that comes around innovation is this idea of your ability to use a shared language when it comes to innovation. We know innovation is a loaded term. We know some people recognize it as the opportunity to transform and change the way we do business. We also know other people think it's a bright, shiny object, have innovation overload, or want to put their head in the sand and say lawyers by definition can't be innovative, so we're going to call it fake news and ignore it. So if we don't have a clear definition of what we're talking about in innovation, it gets really hard to get things done. So at GrowthPlay, we have a very simple definition of innovation. We define it as finding new or better solutions to problems that need to be solved. And we also recognize that there are different ways to achieve those goals, and inside your organization it may mean different things. So we've created the chart on the screen today as a way to start socializing inside your firm. What do we really mean when we say we're going to find newer, better solutions to problems that need to be solved? How can we think about that? And in some ways, this is a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, there's what we think of as sustaining innovation, which is innovation around known problems and innovating around the existing client experience. We know for a fact, whether your firm embraces the concept of innovation or not, every firm has pockets of innovation going on inside them, or you wouldn't be as successful as you are right now. The sustaining innovation is when you take those pockets of innovation and make them standard across the firm. So we see this with client experience initiatives, and we see this with client R&D labs, where we pull people, where we're actually pulling our clients together and co-designing solutions that are going to solve their existing problems. At the other end of that spectrum, we have what we think of as disruption, right? Disrupting innovation. And that's the place where we're creating entirely new business models and entirely new ways of doing things. Disruptive innovation is a lot of the work that we're seeing with predictive analytics and AI, with legal technology providers and other service providers. Those non-law legal services by definition are disruptive because they've disrupted the law business. but we also see disruption inside our law organizations when we take something that was once automated, or that was once done manually, and we automate it. And as a result of that, it changes the way we use certain roles inside the organization. So associates, instead of being doc review people, conducting document review, are now being legal advisors on what the insights and information and how to best glean insights into that. Those are all examples of disruptive litigation, or excuse me, of disruptive innovation. In between, we have optimizing, right? Optimizing is improving the known, creating technology efficiencies and effectiveness that either deliver services better and faster to clients or create opportunities for higher margins inside your organizations. Legal project management, any kind of technology automation tool can fit into that. And then creating or activating innovation. These are where we're collecting the knowledge base of the entire organization. And instead of perfecting a process, we're really taking the data inside our organization, whether it's big data that we're cultivating to help predict outcomes and results for our clients through litigation analysis, or whether it's simply getting 17 people in a room together who do one thing well and collecting the collective insights of all of those people to find new and better ways to solve those problems, or to communicate the ways that you can help clients and find new markets or new services to serve. So a couple things to take away from this as you think about how can you start creating a shared language inside your law organization. It's to start with these definitions and making sure that we're talking the same language, so that we can move the needle and move the needle forward on what we're going to do. Whether these specific categories can be helpful to you in saying, this is where we play, right? Some of the organizations we work with say, hey, we do a little bit of all of this, depending on the initiative and what the problem is that we're trying to solve. We play in all four of these categories. We have other firms that we work with that say, hey, we're optimizers. Our job is we do the same thing over and over again, and our innovation strategy is to find different and better ways of doing that same thing that we're going to do all over again, or to do it for new and different, to extend it to broader groups of people. But we're just going to play in this optimization bucket and find ways to do things better just in this one area. That piece of it doesn't matter as much as making sure that you all, in addition to having that clear vision, knowing what your B is, but being able to talk about it in an efficient and effective way. Last note that really should have been the first note when it comes to this slide. You'll see in the middle of this slide the client experience. No matter what what area of innovation that you want to play in, the client experience is the single most important thing. If you are not innovating around a specific client need, opportunity, or problem, you're really engaging in bright, shiny object innovation activities. It's not going to create the sustained results because you're not solving a problem that needs to be solved. And so in everything that we do, everything that you do, no matter what process or how you engage in that, you have to you always have to come back to that question. What is the problem we are trying to solve? What is the positive result that we're going to create from solving this problem? And how is the client or the underlying stakeholder going to be different or better as a result of this project? When you can do that, you can be highly confident that you're going to be successful in what you're accomplishing. Best practice number 3 is organizing for action. This is important in terms of setting yourself up for success right from the onset of any type of initiative that you're working on. So when we've talked about your vision, you know where you want to go, you've got a language, so now you're all communicating well with each other. Now you're in a position to say, what what are our priorities and where do they fit inside of our organization? There's one thing we know with 100% certainty, that if innovation requires changing your culture, it's probably not going to work. It is just too steep a hill to roll a rock up to kind of think that we're going to change the way a culture exists. So we need to organize for action in a way that takes advantage of the strengths of your existing cultures. And so the chart on this page is to give you a tool to help you think about whether your innovation is designed to fuel performance. Is it operationalized, something that maybe you are already structured inside your organization to solve for those problems? Or is the innovation that you're involved in something that's going to create potential for you in the future to help you adapt and respond to what's going to be true in three or 5 years from now? So when we can first distinguish those two things, because performance innovation can often be executed inside an existing team, whether that's at the firm, whether that's a firm-wide or cross-discipline initiative, whether that's within an existing team, or whether it's just a pet project that you've taken on because you know this is a problem to be solved and you want to make sure that that happens. So you've got those different ways of organizing it, and then you can say, hey, here are performance initiatives that we're doing, and the bullet points in this chart, they're just some examples, whether that's a client feedback program or a client portal or creating a practice and industry playbook so that you're all executing on sales and business development in a consistent process that you can measure and manage. Those are often things that you're already structured to do. And one way I think about it is, do we know what the problem is we're trying to solve, and do we know how to solve it? Then where does it go in our performance priority list, and what type of team are we going to build to achieve that? And then there's things maybe we aren't doing, right? Maybe these are the green initiatives that we haven't yet been able to take on. We may have a laundry list of those things, or we may just have one or two things we're trying to prove concept on. But the question there is, how are we going to organize those initiatives to be successful? Can we draft an innovation initiative into an existing team that already works? Or do we need to create a new or dedicated team to take those things on? Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but the way to start that process is to really think about, how do you operate today? What can we take advantage of? And how can we best organize ourselves so that we keep the trains moving, and that we're making sure that we achieve all the day-to-day operational things while holding space for the innovation initiative. The other thing is, we think about organizing for action, to recognize that organization is simply a structural issue. How are we going to create these teams? The what pieces already exist. So the what pieces are tools, whether that's design thinking or a Lean Six Sigma or an internal process you've already established on how to do problem solving and get things done. Those are the tools. You can take advantage of, of some or all of them. Some people, you actually know how to solve these problems, and you have a process for tackling the unknown. Other organizations don't. They've never taken on these initiatives. So you might want to invest in learning or getting trained in some of these tools. The thing I just want to make sure you distinguish is a tool from organizing principles, because at the end of the day, these are just means of getting to your end. And one of the traps that we see firms get stuck into is they'll say, oh, well, we want to do innovation. Let's do a design thinking workshop. And a design thinking workshop is fun and it's interesting, and it gives you a taste of a new problem solving approach. But in and of itself, It is not innovation. It's simply a problem-solving tool that you can use to apply to the specific problems that you've identified inside your organization. So don't think of the tools as innovation in itself. Think of the tools as a means for you to be more innovative. The talent analytics, client value assessment, client experience pillars, innovation mapping, those are all tools that GrowthPlay can help, that GrowthPlay helps clients with. There's other ones as well. So again, no matter what you do, work with what you have, start with those tools that are already on the table, and then figure out where your gaps are and gap fill once you've identified, you know, what else you need and what's going to work best within your own culture. So at this point, it's kind of the point that I always think to myself, well, look, that's pretty straightforward and it's a pretty practical approach, and I can actually see how this might work. How come then innovation seems to still, we still get so stuck in innovation when it comes to law firms? Why is it that only 5% of managing partners have a high degree of confidence in their firm's ability to innovate? And that's the area that really gets us interested and excited about saying, how can we really tackle that problem? And when we think about what's the root cause, if you ask the surveys, they'll say, hey, the #1 challenge facing law firms in innovation is partners' inability to change. Well, that's true. It's also not limited to law firm partners. It has to do with the fact that we are human beings, and human beings are wired to be drawn to security and clarity and consistency. Innovation by definition is not guaranteed. It's not the safe way out, and there's no guaranteed results on that. So when we think about innovation and where we get stuck, I think we have to recognize that these are constraints that exist in the world. Everyone has innovation fear factors. It is not unreasonable to predict that people are going to be afraid inside a law firm that if you do something super innovative, maybe my job won't be relevant anymore. People may say, you know, it's not unreasonable to say we are not resourced to take on any new initiatives. We're resource constrained. All of these innovation fear factors are absolutely valid, and they're constraints that are going to exist inside every organization. So when we think about innovation, this is a place where some people say, well, it can't be done. If we go back to that very first slide and go back to thinking about scuggling, it's also not a choice. So what are we going to do? Are we going to put our heads in the sand and say it's just too hard? And then in that case, it's just a ticking time bomb until the organization becomes irrelevant? Or are we going to embrace this? Are we going to accept these realities and find ways to organize around it? And that's where I think is the place that we get stuck, and it's also where we miss the boat. We miss this human element, and in our quest for instant gratification and one-size-fits-all solutions and all of the things that technology has created in our need for short-term one-size-fits-all results, we really miss that opportunity to make innovation accessible and achievable inside our organization. And we see this, we saw this recently with the Thai soccer team, the rescue mission in Thailand a few weeks ago. I mean, when you want a model for innovation, there's nothing more inspiring than what we saw there. It was such a reminder of when we put really, really smart people in a room together with a really hard problem to solve, that we have the ability to solve almost any problem, and to come together and to do it in a way where you can take the best and the brightest minds, that you can come up with solutions, that you can test them over and over, that you can prove concept on them, and then you can execute and create something that is truly transformational. In this case, saving of human lives. And so while all of that was an amazing end result to watch, it was also interesting to me that we still got distracted, right? In the middle of what was going on, if you were watching that unfold, all of a sudden there was this bright, shiny object that dropped out of the sky. Elon Musk, you know, big name, all of a sudden comes out and over Twitter has identified that they've invented a kid-sized submarine, and he's going to fly it over. He's going to fly it over to Thailand and hopefully be able to use it for the kids. And when you first hear that, you're like, whoa, that sounds so cool. How amazing. It's the silver, you know, it's the magic, it's the golden ring, it's the silver bullet. We've got this big name, and we can get excited about it, and it creates this potential for those perfect solutions. Well, look, it was a great idea, and, you know, like, we need people like that who are willing to invest and try to do those things, but it also didn't work, right? It was a quick fix or for a solution that got us distracted, because at the end of the day, the solution to that problem was having really great leadership in terms of coordinating highly intelligent people with great ideas and putting a process in place, brainstorming, testing, coming up with ideas, prototyping, practicing, and then putting it together for success. And so as we think about, all too often inside our organizations, we're trying to create these innovation labs that enable the ability to create a kid-sized submarine, when what we really need to do is create innovation labs that help us solve those real problems. And that, to me, is the underlying difference between what it's going to take for us to be successful and keep us from getting stuck. It's also underlying the work that we've been doing in one of the things that we've been really curious about and led to our innovation study. Because as we looked at the way most lawyers leverage strengths and diversity to create innovation teams, we really recognize that the most common way law firms have been doing that is by identifying specific innovation competencies. In most cases, they fall into areas of technical expertise, technology, business, marketing, different functional units, and different highly technical, experienced people with different functional areas of technical expertise. And this is important, and it's absolutely essential to being successful in innovation. But when you map that against the challenges that we can be almost 100% certain that one or more of these things are going to come up, you can be really certain that somebody's going to be fighting over resources, that we're going to have to, you know, the time and energy and attention of our shared staff, that there's going to be interpersonal conflicts. We've got to create buy-in. We've got to overcome those fear factors, both within our team, across our organizations, with our other service providers. We know we're going to get distracted, and we're probably going to get tired. If we know with great degree of certainty, these are the challenges we can anticipate, we can't necessarily make them go away, but we can figure out, we can organize ourselves and build a team that's going to be capable of addressing those challenges. But when you look at that against the technical expertise, there's a disconnect there, right? There's nothing that says that people with these technical expertise are going to be equipped to solve those challenges. And so what that told us is that we need to actually look at what else do we need? What are the other competencies, skills, and capabilities that are going to enable us to be successful in doing something that's never been done before, in doing it in a way that's going to be sustainable and consistent, and that's going to get people excited, and most importantly, that's going to drive value for our organizations and for the clients that we serve. And so that was the underlying starting point. That was the starting point for our innovation study. And what we were able to do in attracting, again, more than 50 innovation leaders from around the country, people from law firms, from legal technology companies, and law departments, to help us really hone in on what are those other skills. And as a result of that work, what we've identified is that the true essential skills beyond technical expertise, subject matter expertise alone, is that we've got to have these competencies around leadership, around collaboration, and around relationship building. And it's these competencies that are going to help us respond to the challenges we know and can anticipate are going to arise in any of in any of the initiatives that we're going to do. So among those, within those buckets of leadership, collaboration, and relationship building, there were some specific. We were able to uncover some specific drivers of success from the people who are doing this and are doing it well. And among those competencies from a leadership perspective, and incidentally, when we say leadership, we mean leadership with a small L, which means that everyone is a leader. But when we look at those leadership competencies, what are those essential skills? This idea of positivity, leading with potential and positivity versus that we're doing this and versus pain and pressure. Our ability to be persuasive in driving key initiatives, our ability to anticipate conflict, political astuteness. The other thing that really struck out to us in the work that we did about innovation leadership is almost universally people who are in leadership roles have no position, they have a title, but they don't have that positional authority. So they have to be able to lead without having, being at the top of the hierarchy, And so that makes their leadership skills, impacts those skills that are most essential. But those leadership skills are absolutely a requirement. So we need to look at technical expertise, and we need to look at these leadership competencies. From a collaboration standpoint, it's the same thing. We need to have collaborative teams. Teaming needs to be a verb and not a noun. It's not a thing we put together, rather it's a way that we work. And when we look at the most successful innovation teams, what we are finding is that those who are getting some of the core skills inside the most collaborative teams when it comes to innovation was a natural curiosity, a team orientation, the ability to be flexible, and an inclination toward risk taking. And that those, in addition to the natural skills that are necessary for collaboration, those specific competencies are going to set you up for success inside your innovation teams. And then the last piece, this idea of relationship building, to me, I think this is one of the most important places. This is the place where we're missing the boat day in and day out, quite frankly, not just with innovation, but across our organizations when it comes to growth effectiveness. We are forgetting that human element about how we connect with people. And so you'll see on the slide that we have that we use the word sales. And we know sales is a four-letter word, continues to be with many lawyers. But we also know that at its heart, our ability to drive change in organizations is about our ability to be able to sell our ideas to other people and to create conditions where people will want to buy in to those things that are going to make their lives better. The other thing we know from sales skills, from the profiles around, from the 45 years of data that we have around sales profiling, is that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to successful selling. So we've actually identified 5 specific roles when it comes to driving change inside law organizations. But the 3 we wanted to preview with you today, and just to give you a perspective on how those look different in action, is this trust builder, the motivator, and the educator. And so trust building, the trust builder, people who are able to sit down with people on a one-on-one level, really take stock and really understand where they're coming from, understand what those fear factors are, understand what drives them, and help build their trust so that the person that you want to buy into what you're doing trusts that not only are you trying to be successful at what you're doing, but that you have their interests at heart. When you can, that is a key role inside any innovation organization. And that's one way of selling and creating buy-in for your ideas. The motivator is a completely different personality, is a completely different profile type. A motivator, I always think of as the person who can sell air conditioning to Eskimos, right? They're the people that just by their sheer energy and excitement and are just so positive and can show that potential that why wouldn't you want to buy into this? Because you want a little bit of what that person's selling, right? And so motivators are also essential. One of the participants in our study is a chief innovation officer of an AmLi 100 firm. And when we really got into this conversation about where success and failure, like what has really been the cornerstone of their success, because this particular firm is doing some really, really amazing things. And he's like, yeah, we have all this stuff and it's so good. He said, but the difference, what's making a difference for us is we have this guy. We have this guy on our team who is so excited about what we're doing. And every time he talks to someone, he's highlighting all the successes. And because he's out there promoting and sharing our quick wins with people, he's creating this energy and excitement that, but for that, we would not be able to implement so many of the things that we're doing. And that's really at the essence of what a motivator looks like. And then the third is subject matter expertise, right? It is the educator. And the difference, right? An educator is someone who can take all that information that's going on inside an initiative or what's going on in the marketplace and all these fear factors and can actually create a business case for why this new way of doing work is better or different than the way other people have done it. So these three profiles are very, very different and distinct, but they're more tools in your toolkit to help you ensure success. So as we think about it, the bad news that I'm sharing with you all today is that there's a lot more than technical expertise that's going to go into your success. The good news is that we have some really great data about what those competencies are and what those skills are. And even more important, almost everything on this list that we're showing you today is highly coachable and they're skills that you can develop with people. But what we need to do is to be aware that it's not just about getting the best solution. Our real success is going to be our ability to anticipate these challenges and to create a team that's going to be equipped and armed to respond to those challenges when they arrive. And to me, I think that's the missing piece of what we're doing. So we want to think about how do we find those people and how do we develop those skills to overcome those challenges. And what I love about being a part of GrowthPlay, and you've all seen, for those of you who are on some of our previous seminars, you've gotten a flavor for how talent analytics can be used to help predict those competencies. This is another place where I think talent analytics are increasingly valuable because it gives you evidence and data about the natural strengths of the people inside your organization. And when you start using this natural strengths around leadership, collaboration, and relationship building to put the right people in the right roles, you really have the potential, and then develop those skills, you really have the opportunity to truly transform the organization. So we have a few minutes today. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A box on our that's on the Zoom meeting. There should be a button you can click to ask any questions. But as we start to wrap up today, I hope what you're starting to see is that, one, there is a path that, despite some of the challenges that are out there about creating growth effectiveness and inspiring innovation, there really is a path out there and a practical approach, no matter what size of organization that you're in or what level of sophistication that you have. And I'm hopeful that some of these tools will help you be able to enable conversations as you go forward. As we leave today, I want to just leave with the 5th best practice. As we talk about engaging and energizing our team, regardless of whether you have the perfect team right now, or you have the perfect initiative, or you're solving any of these problems, if we want to really engage and energize people around the potential and possibility of growth and performance, we have to focus on connecting with the heart before we start connecting with the head. This idea that people they buy and they buy in because of an emotional connection, and they justify it with their brain, with their rational, and with their heads, is incredibly important to everything we do. For those who are involved in innovation, problem solving, or trained in different problem solving skills like design thinking, you'll know that empathy is central to innovation and to driving change inside our organization. And so one of the easiest and most practical ways for you to start using empathy to drive conversations about change and potential is to exercise what we call the platinum rule. Many of us have heard of the golden rule. The golden rule says, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. And on its face, the golden rule sounds pretty awesome, and it seems like a really good underlying philosophy to go through life, which is just be nice to people. But in some ways, when you think about it, the golden rule is a little selfish, right? The golden rule presumes that everybody wants to be treated the way that you want to be treated. And that's a pretty bold assumption, because we're all different. And so the platinum rule is a way of saying that instead of doing unto others as we want done unto, we should do unto others as they want done unto. And when we go in with this very other-centered mindset about the people that we're working with, whether they're on our team, whether they're an end user client, or there's someone that we're partnering with across a practice, we go into every conversation that we're having with this idea of my job is to first understand what the person I'm talking to cares about. That's going to create conditions where you're building that heart, you're using heart logic to build trust and create those conditions for success. So the questions on here, and the thing about it is the only way we can do that is by figuring out what it is that the other person cares about. And so if we invest time early in figuring out what they care about, you're going to be able to be more successful on the back end. So these questions, just questions like, really understanding what matters most to the person that you're working with, or that you're trying to engage in the initiative that you're involved in. What do they care about? What are their top priorities? How is their life going to be changed if we don't engage in this initiative? And how do they measure success? When we truly understand the answers to those questions, it gives us the opportunity to create conditions for buying in, using a variety of techniques and tactics, whether it's concern or curiosity or confidence or connection. It gives us the ability to do that, and we can make those rational arguments that will justify it. But we have to first connect with people and make people and demonstrate to people that not only are we trying to drive this initiative forward, but that we actually care and want their lives to be better. So as we wrap up this conversation today, I'm hopeful that you can maybe take this last piece and start putting that into practice as you start to lead conversations about where change might be. And so as I'm looking at the questions that are coming in, one of the questions that's been asked is, what's the best way to start building the team if we recognize that we need all of these things, but we don't know how to find them? And so as you think about how can we start putting these into practice and start finding, creating the most effective, whether it's a growth effectiveness or an innovation team, one of the best places to start is to go back to that first question about who do you want to be and what is the purpose, and the second question being what is the purpose of why you're doing this, so that you can be clear around what your end goals are. And then you can start to really look at, knowing our culture, what are those potential barriers that we can start to anticipate, and what elements, what do we need, what types of skills are we going to need from our team members as we think long term about how to be successful for this particular effort. So talent analytics are a great way to create some self-awareness about the natural skills that you have. But the other way to do it, and I think we do this, is sometimes we just know as like the people who are the coalition of the willing and those natural skill sets. A great way to start is those people who bring those other skills, even if they don't have that technical expertise that you have. And then, so thank you for that question. And as we wrap up for the day, I really want to make sure that you all have a tool to start engaging in conversations with your leaders. So these 5 questions, and we'll be sending the materials out at the end of this session, but these are 5 great questions to start when you're having conversations with leadership about what success looks like and how you're going to start organizing and dedicating resources to accomplish those things. So number 1 is vision. You have to get really clear about where you're going. Number 2, you want to think about where innovation fits in. Is that part of an operation, is that part of a team that already exists, or is this something we need to create a dedicated team for? What is the best way to organize for success? What are our success metrics? Is it just about the bottom line numbers, or do we want to create an environment where we're moving from bottom line to triple bottom line, where success is not just measured by revenue alone, but also by how do we attract and retain talent, and how do we stay fulfilled as a profession? What are those metrics that are most important to you, and how will we measure them? And then ultimately, how are we going to engage and energize teams, knowing that that we're going to run into challenges along the way, and what are the things we can set up from the onset about where we're going? So these questions, if these are areas of interest, are a great starting point, and please recognize that at GrowthPlay, we would like nothing more than to see all of you succeed in your initiatives. And so if there's any insights or wisdom that we can share with you to help you in this journey, we welcome those conversations. And thank you so much for participating today. We look forward to future sessions.